Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brick Railway Builders podcast, a podcast all about Lego trains. This is an interview-style podcast where I introduce everybody in the hobby to everyone. Joining me for this episode is Kumata. Hello, Kumata. How are you doing?
Hi there, I'm not too bad, and yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. It is a sunny day here at the moment. We are finally entering the summer months, so I'm already looking forward to enjoying the sunlight compared to all the miserable British rain we usually get.
Yep, and instead of doing that, you're stuck in here recording a podcast with me, but never mind.
Oh, but that's the fun part, though. I mean, I'm happy it's sunny outside, but I'm staying inside. I'm one of those people.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not even when you're indoors, it's nice. Having the sun through the windows, it's a nicer feeling.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, please formally introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kumata or Kumata JDG, as you may know me from various places online. I am a Lego train builder. I specialise in both normal, shall we say, Lego trains and Thomas the Tank Engine themed models. My main focus with Thomas is Railway series specifically, so I do like to aim to build characters that are more in line with their depictions in the books or the models created by the Reverend Wilbert Audrey. So no faces, unfortunately, but maybe a bit more detail than you would otherwise see. As an aside, I do also work as a digital artist. I do create art of Thomas as well. So after the podcast is done, if you want to check me out, then have a look at my socials and you'll see some nice pictures there.
So, using that and jumping straight into the first question, what can you tell us about your current Lego train collection?
I would say it's quite big, a lot bigger than I've shown. I've got quite a lot of models that I've built or am in the process of rebuilding, and I've yet to get round to take photos of. I also have a home layout on which I plan to have my stuff running or displayed, I should say, which I've also not got round to fully completing or photographing for quite a while now. So it's there in spirit, even if you can't see it physically.
It has been very cool to see these pictures all of a sudden just appear in mass of all the models that you've built. It's actually really exciting to once again see what you've built, but at the same time, it's cool to see them all appear in mass. Again, it's the fact that I've seen your models in old pictures and I've seen them in person once, but now you've got the opportunity to get loads of pictures done in your own time. It's that feeling of, oh, okay, I've seen him made all this. Okay, what next have you got to show us? And that's the exciting thing that I really love.
That's good to hear. I mean, I do like to surprise people with stuff. I'm not one of these people who likes to share WIPs much. You know, I sort of, because my building process really is very, very slow compared to the average Lego train builder. Partly because I build physically. So, if you're building stuff in studio, you can undo things very quickly. You can recolor stuff very quickly or test things out without much kind of consequence. So physically tinkering with stuff obviously always takes longer, as you all know. I don't have the most amount of free time with which to build stuff. So yeah, I don't like to share a work in progress because it could be months before that ever gets followed up on. And I feel like sometimes the hype is gone. If you say, "Oh, I'm building this thing," and everyone, "Oh, wow, that's amazing," and then like you finish it 6 months later, and it's, "Oh, well, yeah, we knew you were making this."
That's something I can absolutely respect because early on, at least say, I don't know, 4 years ago, I was definitely in the mindset of, I'm building something that I really like. Maybe I should try and take pictures during the process just so I can have some work in progress pictures to post online. But it was
Yeah.
so sluggish and slow, and I feel like I'm definitely one of the quicker builders in the hobby because, at least before a certain stage in my professional working life changed, I had so much time free in the day to be able to build anything. And I don't know if you remember seeing this on Discord, but it was coming up to the end of January, and I thought, okay, there's a bunch of Thomas characters I want to build. I'm going to build them. And at some point near the end of the day, it will be the final, like, there will be a couple of work in progress pictures, but it was for the sakes of showing a few people in that Discord server to begin with. And by the end of the day, here's Arthur, here's Mavis, here's Ryan. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. Was it a weekend you shared them? But yeah, I do remember that over the course of however many
It was the course of
hours
two
maybe.
weeks, yeah, just overall like one model a day over the course of 2 weeks.
That was it. No, oh yeah, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, it was literally just one after the other. Everyone's so, oh, wow, you've made Arthur, and then almost in response to that, oh yeah, I've also made this, and I've also made this. I see where you're coming from. What you've said as well. You probably are, in terms of physical builders, definitely one of the fastest builders in terms of Lego trains that I know. Because from when you say you're going to make something, and then when you do complete it, it seems like you can kind of set your mind to a project, and then just that's it. You're making it all time devoted to that, and it just gets done.
A bonus to that as well was because of my previous working schedule, I had about 3 quarters of the day to my, like, I wake up and I'm not going to work until the evening, so I've got the
Right.
whole day to build. And my models, looking back at some of them, they do have detail, but I do look at some of them, I think, oh, there's so much more I could add. I've seen some of the things that other people have built, so I know I can do this, but I probably haven't. But the simplicity of some of my models definitely plays a factor in how quick I've been able to put them together. You get the basic shapes, then you get into the more locomotive specific shapes, and then the final model. But yeah, it was definitely a weird sort of 2 weeks to look back on and think, oh my god, I built all of that in 2 weeks. I don't want to make it seem like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but it was just so. Well, I don't even know what word to use. It was a thing that I did. That was a 2 week process that actually happened. And I still can't believe it.
I think I do agree. When you've sometimes it comes in bursts. I find as well you get a lot of stuff done at once, and then it can be a long while before you really kind of get your teeth into another project. I think some people it just comes in waves like that, and in that case, you shared everything pretty much as soon as it was done, one after the other. And as you say, I've done recently. I've shown quite a few photos of things almost all at once in the Discord. But I am tempted sometimes to almost create a backlog of photos of completed models, and then think, well, I could space this out over a long period of time, which means in theory, I don't have to be, I could appear to be constantly productive, whereas I'm not actually necessarily working on stuff all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So, what is your favourite model that you have built so far?
That is a tricky one. I mean, there's always kind of maybe an elevated fondness for your most recent models. I find
Yeah, the
probably
recency bias is definitely a strong one.
yeah, that's the word I'm thinking of. Yeah, because obviously it's the novelty, it's of it being new and everything, and probably also your skills develop over time. It may be the most complex or the most technically impressive model you've built so far. So there is also that element of pride. Yeah, I mean, with my models, I mean, I sort of my train models, I think of them in two categories: the Thomas models and the non-Thomas models. So if I can sort of look at it in that way and pick two favourites, because I sort of look at them, I judge them by different criteria. I personally, of the Thomas models, really, I mean, I think my Thomas, as is now, it's been updated, is my favourite, because I'm just very pleased with a lot of the elements in that. And I think it's a good representation of what I want to represent in the character. And then of my own non-Thomas models, the more realistic or more adult, more serious characters, you might say, or not even characters. They're just engines. I quite like my pannier tank, which is one of my earliest of these builds that I've done. It's been updated a few times, but as it is in its current state, I'm just very it just makes me happy to look at. I like the livery, I like the design of it, the proportions. It's all just very pleasing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely fallen more in love with the Great Western Pannier tank as well. I do look back to my model of Duck, and I do have, I think I said this in Discord a day or two ago as well, where I think I'm going to make one more model, go all in for the detail, and I want it to be a pannier tank, and I'm going to use Duck as the example, or use Duck as the model for that, because it really could do with a rebuild anyways. And seeing how you've built your models, again, this goes back to what I said earlier, where I have seen some of your models in person. The overall size and the chunk and the detail is just amazing, and there's definitely a sense of you can take tips from everyone you come across in the hobby, because no two models will ever be the same. So you can have your perfect model in your hand and go, yep, I love that. You will see someone else's model and you go, Oh my god, I love how they did that. I gotta add that to mine. And again,
Yeah,
seeing your models that have the Railway series realistic take on the Thomas characters, there's definitely that elements with your models in my eyes. So looking at your pannier tank, it was, well, I do want to say exciting because it was cool to see, but I don't know if the word exciting itself was too strong a word. Simply
I
put,
think I
yeah,
know what you mean now. I think I know what you mean. It's because a lot of these models, obviously, we see them from builders online. It is rare that you do meet up with the physical versions of these models. I mean, obviously, half the time these models are only designed digitally, so you'll never see them in the flesh. The physical ones as well. It could be someone halfway around the world, and there is something different about seeing a model in person. And I think almost sometimes, I mean, something I struggle with, which maybe we'll come on to later, is in a photo, it's hard sometimes to capture something about a model. Like you said about maybe like the size or chunkiness, some that sort of thing doesn't always come across in a photo if it's not a very good photo. And I'm not the best at taking photos of models. Sometimes there are elements which, yeah, you don't really appreciate until you see in a model when it's there in front of you. And I've felt the same way when I've seen models, other people's models, in person at shows and stuff. Yeah, they definitely come across in a different way to when you see them on a screen.
that's a very good thing you brought up because I knew exactly the example to use for this. So the LUKR, the Lego Train Club that's based here in the UK, has an annual members get together because all the members are spread across the UK. It's very difficult for us to kind of meet up at shows, or at least a lot of us to meet up at shows. So Trace or Pierce Bricks is one of our international members, and he made it to the previous members weekend, and he brought his models with him.
I didn't realise that. I know Trace's models, and I didn't realise he was at the meetup.
He and Renzo, who is also another international member, made it as well. So when it came to the weekend and I saw them, I was like, oh my god, you traveled halfway the world to come and see us. This is so cool. But Trace brought his models with him, and one of them was his Great Western King class. Now, I don't know if it's because Trace posts a lot of stuff to Instagram. I don't know if it's because the Instagram screen is so small. I was shocked when I saw his King class on the table in person. I thought, oh, that's way bigger than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, so long story short, I was able to see his model on the table in front of me in person. Compared to all the tiny pictures I've seen on my phone, it's actually there with some chunk, with some mass. And it was so cool to be able to recognize what pieces were where, because that's something that you can't really do. Well, depending on the model and how high resolution and how bright the colors of the pieces are, like, I don't know, just any arbitrary example that you can find. If it's a really bright, you might be able to recognize some of the build methods, but when you see it in person, that's where you have a much better appreciation of the model that's been built.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well about the colors as well is thinking Lego colors are very awkward to photograph in such a way that all of the colors are represented accurately. I mean, obviously, with a train model, you're going to have a lot of black, which is not very good for color balance in photos. First off, then you have colors like the red, which again is in most train models, in the buffer beams and
Oh my
such,
god,
which
my
is so.
coronation.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I know what you're going to say because obviously your kind of personal livery is has a lot of red to it.
Yeah, it does.
And I've noticed this having photographed a few kind of red centric models recently is it just saturates horribly when you try and photo it, and then you try and adjust the colors, but then it means the black becomes very sort of muddy, and it becomes what you think is going to be quite a quick photo session ends up becoming, like an afternoon of work because you've got to try and make the photo appear legible, but at the same time, you don't want to modify it so much that it's not actually representing what the model looks like in person. It's definitely a difference when you're seeing something in person in the light of day. Yeah, it is completely different. Even a model that maybe you've seen in a photo and understood every piece that's gone into it, it still looks different and it's still a different experience seeing it there.
So this is a question that I have exclusive to Lego Thomas Builders. What character model was the hardest or was harder to build than you expected?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a two-part question, so I'll give you two different answers. The hardest to build is without a doubt Thomas himself, partly because of my own self imposed limitations. I don't like to use custom prints or stickers in any of my models. I like to just stick to official Lego parts. I don't like to modify parts. I do use third party wheels. That's my only real concession. Everything else I like to be, official Lego that you can buy off Bricklink or you find in sets and what have you. So yeah, with Thomas, I wanted to brick build the lining and number, and that is obviously very tricky if you're sticking just to official Lego parts, especially because the proportions I was going for, which are in my mind the quite accurate to the proportions of the Reverend Audrey's Thomas model, which is itself kind of a semi E2 proportions, but that's another story anyway. Yeah, so I'm trying to sort of recreate the lining in kind of a clean way. Was very very awkward, and it took a lot of playing with different design techniques, and there's always just that little bit that doesn't quite marry up, as like a small gap or something, especially if you use things like brackets. There's always a slight offset from Lego geometry, and it was very frustrating at one time, but it's at a stage now where that's probably why it's one of my favorite models now, because I arrived at a point where I'm very pleased with how it looks, and I'm pleased that I didn't resort to breaking any of my own self-imposed rules in order to get there. So yeah, I quite I'm very fond of it in that sense, and so that's why I think that was the hardest to build, but I did expect it to be hard to build. So that's why, in terms of harder to build than expected, I will have a different answer. I think in terms of something that was more of a challenge than I was expecting to be was Bill and Ben, because they're so small. I thought, well, not much detail there. They're going to be a piece of cake because it's just there's hardly any bricks there. But no, the smaller you go, the more you have to try and capture detail with less pieces. They were very hard, or a lot harder to build than I expected, because they are so small, and because you've a lot less pieces in which to capture detail, and because I go for what I call a railway series style. I don't build, in my mind, I'm not building Thomas the Tank Engine characters. I'm building railway series characters, which means most of the time they've got more of a resemblance to their real life basis, which means, unfortunately for me, more detail, and again, less pieces with which to do it when you're dealing with the smaller characters. So yeah, with Bill and Ben, and I will send you a picture of those to show, they have a lot of they're cramped into a very small space, and I'm pleased with the amount of detail I was able to capture, but there are one or two little concessions which, in a perfect world, I'd like to amend, but I don't think I physically could without either modifying pieces or Lego bringing out new pieces in different shapes.
When you mentioned Bill and Ben, I immediately thought, yeah, I totally get that. Because when I built my Bill and Ben models, the cab, I have mentioned this a few times, the cab was something that got entirely rebuilt in order for me to accommodate the ultimate final results that I was going for. When you posted pictures of your Bill and Ben models on Discord, it felt like it just came out of nowhere. And it's like, I don't recall anyone else really building Bill and Ben, but this was another one of those models where I got excited about. It was like, oh my god, someone else has built Bill and Ben.
I do quite like to be the first or one of the first to build a certain character or model, and there's one or two obscure ones which I think I might have been maybe the only one of our Discord server to build. But in terms of Bill and Ben specifically, yeah, you're right. I don't think I've seen many other Bills and Bens by any other builders, and certainly I don't think anyone else has built them in bright light orange, which I've chosen to do. Again, because I'm basing them off the Railway series depiction, which does have them in more of a darker shade of yellow than the TV series does. Regular Lego yellow doesn't really cut it. So I sort of went with that, and I think it suits them a lot more for the look I'm going for. Yeah, so I'm quite pleased that they, at the moment anyway, no doubt some others will catch up and build up their own Bill and Bens, but for the moment they're quite unique in our little circle.
And now we move on to my favourite question, because I'm pretty sure every answer has been different. What is your ideal Lego train set?
Well, I don't think my answer will be that original. Having listened to your other podcasts and the answers other people have given, this is something that has come up in some form before. For me, the ideal Lego train set would be something smaller, something like maybe as part of the Lego City range, a small tank engine, preferably a tank engine. I mean, realistically speaking, they probably wouldn't do a steam engine, but this is ideal. So I'm breaking the the boundaries of feasibility for this. But yeah, I think a small tank engine, like a shunter, something along those lines, and a couple of small bits of stock. And then, yeah, it doesn't even have to have any track pieces involved because for me, this would be as something to complement other existing Lego train sets, but at a much more affordable price point. I buy Lego sets differently now as an adult than I did as a kid. But I'm thinking for me, because nowadays I design and build my own Lego trains, I don't really care that much about the official Lego train sets. Obviously, it's nice when they bring out a new one and it's something decent. I wouldn't really be that bothered either way. So I'm thinking more so when I was a kid and they did mean a lot more to me. The thing I always really wanted to see was something like that, a small train set. And the closest I ever got to that was the My Own Train series, which I did have one of. But again, that was a bit too small because you literally had to buy every loco and piece of stock separately. But yeah, I just think a small kind of almost starter train set would be very, very nice. And if it's part of the city range, it doesn't have to be overly detailed. It can just be have some nice detail, but also simple enough to fit in with other Lego City sets. And again, could fit with the aesthetic of other Lego City sets and could be used if someone's buying them to make their own little display. When you see people have made displays out of existing Lego sets because it's either, especially when it's like a kid, they've been bought sets, for the Christmas or birthday, and they've made a little city. And there's always, if they've got a train involved, it's always obviously one of the modern Lego City trains, and they always dominate a lot of the scene, which is nice. But at the same time, I think maybe it's nice to have, if you're building like a city scene, not having to build it around a train. It's just having a smaller train that's there as part of the overall scene, if that makes sense. And I think again, I'm thinking again more along the lines of Kidney. I think a small starter set with a little shunting engine would be nice because it's something that can be added to existing sets or just work on its own as its own thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I can definitely understand the idea of wanting something that a kid could definitely sink their teeth into. And it would definitely be more beneficial if train sets were a bit more simple in that regard, where it doesn't have to be so packed with everything. Again, having mentioned Lego City is a great example where you can have everything ultimately fit a standard, so to say, Lego City, standard in quotation marks. You can build things to that kind of level, and in a way, it really should be sold at that level. A lot of people would love to see sets that would come out and be super detailed, but in turn, that would be super expensive. It's down to the person who's buying it to add to the detail, and that's where the fun is as well. I mean, it really is cool to buy an Emerald Knight, for example, back in the day, and you made it a little bit longer, gave it some bigger wheels, maybe build a second tender, things like that. You have the amazing set itself, but it's down to you to want to improve on it and turn it into the set you wished you had. But the base set itself is still really good for that. And the idea that you mentioned, a small shunter engine with a wagon or two, definitely fits that mold really well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like you say about amending existing sets, I mean, what you find in, when you're involved in, shall we say, adult discussions or adult discussions with adults about Lego trains and the sort of train sets they want to see, as you say, it's always huge, super detailed, super realistic models they want to see, which for me is I kind of it doesn't really appeal to me anymore that much. Again, partly because we kind of design and build our own trains. Anything Lego puts out as an official set is never going to meet exactly our standards, no matter how super detailed and realistic it is. There's something, even if it's just something that's personal preference, it won't quite match up to. So I think there's no point in even wishing that of Lego because again, a huge, super detailed, expensive train set. I mean, I won't use the recent Hogwarts Express as an example because there are a lot of a lot of problems with that set, the price notwithstanding. But it would be better. I would rather see smaller, simpler Lego trains, which people can choose to expand on and modify, or not. I don't think at the moment, you look at the current Lego train availability, they're all very big, very expensive, and they seem to be, I don't know. I'm just not that impressed. If someone's got, let's say, the current Hogwarts Express, or the Crocodile Locomotive, which came out recently, or the Emerald Knight exactly as it was from the set, no modifications, it's just not that impressive because it's just a set you've bought and built. There's no. I'm much more impressed when people modify things, and there's some creativity involved. And even if it's a small model that someone has built, I'm more impressed by even small models which you might not call very good quality, but there's originality to it. They've been created by someone who is trying to create their own train that they want. That impresses me a lot more. So I think it would be much better to have a base like that, a small train set which younger people, younger builders, or even just new builders who don't have that many building skills yet, they can use that as a base to then develop into more original models. But having it be a small set which isn't very expensive, it means it's a lower barrier for entry. To get a Lego train set at the moment, it's always over £100. It's a huge amount of space, so that eliminates a lot of people who might potentially want it. And also now the modern motor systems, a lot of them have to be involved with apps and phones and things like that, and that puts a lot of people off. I just think it's nice that they exist, but there needs to be something smaller and simpler to complement them.
Yeah, for someone like that, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And I want to go back to what you said a moment ago about whilst as adults we might not be too keen for the sets anymore, I still think that the city train sets that came out last year are some of the best ones they've put out compared to previous ones, especially to the 2018 releases. But it was really remarkable just to see something of that quality because they were sets I looked at and I thought, yeah, those are cool. If I had the extra money, I would definitely go for them. But the main reason why I personally haven't is because my personal collection is very full. I don't need or really have the desire to get those sets. But I did get the station. Now, I have built the station, I've done my own video on it, and it is sadly back in the box, but I still love that set. So that's something that I really do miss, is seeing all of the extra bits of the railway as a set. A station, a level crossing, thinking back to, I think it was World City and even the Lego System days, where they just had, it wasn't an excessive amount, but there was another 2 or 3 railway themed sets that you could buy to expand your railway just that little extra more, and it was just so much fun.
I mean, I understand why they don't do those kind of sets anymore. So say they're not profitable. They don't need to exist. Is the kind of the justification that's given. But I don't see it. I mean, I think every now and then bringing out something different, from their current, because their current structure, they've got one passenger train, one freight train, and then a station. That normally seems to be what City has, is as far as trains go, and they never really deviate from that in the past decade or so. Yeah, the other little bits and pieces, the level crossing. I remember there was I think maybe in the late '90s there was a train wash set.
Yes,
That
I
was back.
see that on Bricklink every now and then, and that was definitely a thing.
I never had it, but it always interested me when I saw it in the catalogs, and it was just one of those things. It's something else for your trains to do. This is leading on to what I was going to say, the freight depot, which they have done. There have been a few iterations of this. The one I'm remembering might have been from the 90s, but it was like a road base plate, and there's a length of track along one side, and then kind of a mobile gantry crane which transfers cargo from the rail stock to like a lorry or something like that. That incorporates more to a train than just having it run in a loop and then have it stop at the station. If you've got like a freight depot or a train wash, or other bits and pieces, level crossing as well, it can stop. It's ways for it to interact with other aspects of the other city sets. There's just more ways of play, I suppose, is one way of putting it. It just, I think it encourages that kind of creativity, and you don't really. Yeah, I just, it would be nice to see that brought back in some way, because now I've said that about the freight depot, I've just remembered that I think the last time it appeared was in a train set. There was a freight train in maybe 2008, the yellow cargo train,
Yeah,
which
the
had that
2020, the 2010 one, yeah.
40 cent. Yeah, that was, funny enough, that was actually that was the set that got me out of my Lego Train Dark Ages. I bought that set probably just before buying the Emerald Knight second hand. Yeah, I'd sort of, Lego in general, I'd gotten out of for a long time. But then in 2010, I think I bought that train set because I really like the look of the diesel locomotive, which is unusual for me because I'm not really a fan of diesels. But something about it just, I really liked it. And maybe the presence of that depot within the set appealed to me as well because I remembered seeing it as a kid. But yeah, like that adds an element of play, having that extra stuff in there. Because I think as well, again, I always think of how it would seem to a kid, and if you're not overly interested in trains beyond liking them as toys as a kid, then you see a Lego train set that's a loop of track and a small platform, and you just think, well, that's all trains can do. There's nothing else. There's no other fun to be had from this. But I think having those other little bits, cranes and other ways of interaction, kind of encourages that creative thinking and shows, there are other things you can do with these trains and you can do a lot more. It will be nice to see those sorts of accessory sets, shall we say, appear either within the sets themselves as accessories or smaller supplemental sets to the main train ones.
Just before we move on to the next question, that did remind me of a set I remember getting as a kid years ago. It was from the World City line, and at the time I didn't realize it was a railway themed set, and I think it counts as a railway themed set, but it was a small four-wheeled van and a simple crane that had like two cargo loads. It's a bit difficult for me to describe because it was so old, but I really do need to look into maybe getting another one of those sets because that is something I have fond memories of, and I do know I have all the parts for it somewhere, but I think just having the whole set again and rebuilding it would be a lot more fun. So
Can
moving
you
on
can you
to
remember what that was called, or anything? I'm just thinking. I want to have a look at it now. I want to look it up and see what set you're talking about.
so it's actually a six-wheeled vehicle, and the crane is that. Now I remember being on a bit of a like a family trip of sorts. Went to the toy shop, was able to have this, and I remember playing with it, being all happy, and it's memories. It's memories. I'm not exactly an old person, but nostalgia is there for me with this set, and I really want to get another one.
I do vaguely, now you've shown me the picture, I do vaguely recognise this set. I would not have tagged it as a train set, I must say. I can't quite see from the picture quality, but I think the high vis jackets on the minifigs have got the rail logo on them. Is that right?
At least according to Bricklink, it's catalog sets train 9 volts World City. So I'm
I'm
supposing,
going to guess that's the only indication that it's meant to be a train set is the minifigs having the train gear on them.
yeah. So the
But I
minifigure
think
torsos do have the on the high vis jackets. They do. I can just vaguely see what would be the Lego train logo. So to anyone listening, this is set number 4514, Cargo Crane. It's definitely one of the older sets I've had. I do need to look. Tell you what, we're on Bricklink right now. Let me go to UK stores. No UK stores. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be buying myself one of these anytime soon. But yeah, that's just a set that I remember having in the past, and that's again, it definitely does count as a well, it technically counts as a railway themed train set. So something like that I would love to see going forward.
well, that ties into the depots really of having like a crane which can transfer stuff from road to rail. I think maybe that's the key. Is it's just cranes had a lot of fun to trains.
Yeah, the playability is probably what makes that all click together. Do you have a favorite or standout Lego train builder that you are following online?
I I would only say the people that are involved in our Discord that we use because everyone there we discuss ideas for models and if we need help we help each other, which is for me is the best thing. Is being able to have that kind of feedback before revealing a model publicly. Work out the kinks and to have people who are of similar mindset to discuss these things with. In that sense, they're my favourites because they're helpful and likewise, it's great to see their models as well and the sort of things that they in their own styles and the sort of things they tackle. It's just there are other train builders out there which I had to have impressive models, but there you see them and that's it. It's nice to have that interaction with a group of other Lego train builders, and I am very grateful that that server exists. I can't remember whose idea it was to create it actually in the first place, but whoever did, well done because it's been very useful.
I think it was Wooden Toby because he's one of the two admins for the server. So yeah, there's
Oh yeah,
people
you're
like
right. Now you
Seth
say
Bricks,
that,
Wooden
yeah.
Toby, Branchline Yang, just to name a few. But yeah, there are a good few dozen people in here who we do talk quite regularly. Lego Railway series, of course. There's again a load of good people in there who communicate quite frequently. There's no fakeness between us, and the conversations are always consistent. We're always ourselves, we're always helpful, like you just mentioned, and that's an amazing thing to have with this kind of server.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. There are builders that whose models are impressive, and you're impressed by. But having that personal touch, I think it means a lot more. Being able to have the discussions with other builders. I definitely wouldn't have built as much, and I wouldn't. Maybe I would have just stopped entirely the hobby if that server hadn't existed.
It's interesting how you only really mention this server as well. So, nobody on Flickr, nobody on YouTube, nobody you've seen on any of the Lego Train focused Facebook groups.
I mean, there are people. I mean, off the top of my head, I know as you mentioned, Trace in our lug group who does have some very impressive models. Recently, he's been bringing out a lot of GWR themed stuff, which just looks fantastic. Yeah, I think in terms of other sites, galleries and such, that I didn't really go looking for train builders that much, partly because I do look to other builders for inspiration, but at the same time, I almost feel like if I look at too much stuff, then I will maybe lose a bit of the sense of my own style and just want to copy everything that I see from everyone else. When I started out in the Lego train hobby, cannot remember how long ago it was, maybe 2013 ish, because that would have been when I'll have to check. It might have been a good 10 years ago anyway. But I remember randomly discovering Carl Graytrix's brick shelf account and all of his models there. And the earliest version of my pannier tank was pretty much a reverse engineering of the model I saw there. And that was kind of the habit I fell into is I just tried to copy models that I saw from other better builders without really trying to solve the problems on my own. And that's why I value the server more, because I think we're better at helping each other out with problems. If we kind of come up against an obstacle, we'll ask each other for advice on things, or what looks better between two versions of something. The more I build, the more I design stuff, the more I appreciate the creativity and the originality you get from Lego building. That's kind of, rather than valuing a specific builder, it's more that the builders that are around me that I'm more impressed by, almost because they're more helpful.
That's a very good point you mentioned a moment ago, and I want to touch up on that because this is something I have felt a couple of times in the past, and thankfully I've been able to really shake this feeling. But it's the sense of watching one particular builder online on YouTube mainly, or you go to someone's Flickr page and you're following them constantly. If you're not careful, you will develop the mindset of, I wish I could build like this person, and you're just not satisfied with what you've built. So yeah, there is definitely that dangerous sense of admiring what someone has done is one thing, but there's no need to replicate brick for brick, method for method what that person has made. You should definitely still make your models to your design standard. Even if it isn't as intricate as you would hope, like me, I'm definitely someone who knows that I could build a more intricately detailed model. I just haven't really permitted myself to really do that. But time permitting, I will be able to eventually knuckle down on that in the future. But what you've done is a very good way of carrying on with this hobby. You have, essentially, like you just said, you've surrounded yourself with builders that are on your level. Those are the only builders you will ever kind of bounce off of. And again, the whole idea of getting input from them is very cool. Just going back to what we mentioned earlier in the episode, and not necessarily following any one particular person online, I think is actually a really healthy mindset to have. And I really do praise you for that.
Well, thank you, but I think partly it's also out of a sense of I'm older than the should we call the current internet generation, so I'm not as heavily engrossed in the latest kind of social medias, terminally online, as they might say. But I don't. I like to have the sense of, I do like to follow a lot of builders, and outside of Lego building, because I work as a digital artist as well. I follow a lot of artists and such, and whose work I also follow. But I like to have the separation. I like to follow people, but at the same time, I don't like to feel like my life is enveloped in these things, because you do need to be able to step away from this kind of thing sometimes. As you mentioned, if you're constantly looking at focusing mostly back on Lego, but this does apply to a lot of other things. If you're constantly focusing on someone who appears to be better than you all the time, and you've got a constant feed of their content, and maybe they've got a backlog of things and they've scheduled so that they're posting something every single week. From your point of view, you've got this person who is better than you and is managing to maintain a constant schedule and is outputting all this amazing content, and you just end up you cannot help but compare yourself to them all the time. If that's what you're seeing, it can grate on someone. And I think it's a very good practice for your own mental health to be able to step back from that sometimes, and just to be able to not see these people as amazing as they are. Sometimes you don't need to see that. If that's not too negative to say, in a way it's better not to see them.
And on to our final question. What projects do you have in the works and what do you hope to build in the future?
As far as my Thomas models go, I actually have a set itinerary really of what I want to build. As you mentioned earlier in the episode, I've recently kind of revealed a bunch of stuff at once. What I've been doing over the past however many months it's been since I last shared any of this stuff is tinkering away, building stuff, designing things. Because everything I build is physical, I've only got so much physical space in which to store it all. And also, I only have there are only so many characters in the Railway series that there are to cover. So I kind of set myself almost a list, really, a checklist. And once I cover that, I think I'll stop. I might overhaul the models again in the future, but once I reach a certain point, I don't think I'll want to make any new characters. The list I've got, and this is including, when I say characters, I'm including rolling stock, which is obviously from the Railway series, like Annie and Clarabelle, Northwestern branded trucks, that kind of thing. Anything that can't be, just appear in a railway scene and you not recognise it's from Thomas. I'd have to double check, but I did a count recently, and I think there's about 70 individual things that I had planned to build. Of those, I've got about, let me just look at the list quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4. About 12 more to build of those things. So, yes, I've got 12 things left to build. Most of them are characters. I mean, 70 sounds like a lot, but a lot of it is rolling stock, which people won't really care about or they glance at for a second. So it won't seem that impressive when it's all together. But what I've got left to build are most of the characters because they are more complex as well. On the agenda, I've got Edward and Henry, which I'm working on. I've just started working on. James is a work in progress, which I hope to finish soon. And then beyond them, I have the main characters, or what you'd consider the main famous eight, the Steam Team, whatever you want to call them. The only other one would be Gordon for me to build. I don't want to build him only because I know it's going to be a huge undertaking. As you've seen in the server recently, the Lego Railway series, his Gordon took so long, and it seemed to be an undertaking that it's just intimidating, the idea of tackling him. But at the same time, I know I have to, because I'm going to have every other character made. You can't not have a Gordon if you've got Thomas, Edward, Henry, James, and the rest of them. It will be a long time before I finish even though it sounds like, I've only got 12 left, it will be a long time before I finish that side of my modelling. So that's there'll be a lot of updates to that to look forward to. Other than the Thomas stuff, my quote unquote normal Lego trains, I am also kind of at the end of the actual locos and stock I plan to build for that. Again, a lot of them I've not shown, and I promise I will photo and share them in the coming weeks. The main thing is the layout itself. I have a U-shaped home layout, which represents a branch line connected to a main line junction. So most of it is key elements on the branch. I have my own sort of general geography, backstory, headcanon, whatever you want to call it, for the branch figured out. So there's a lot of detail I know I want to put in it. It's just, putting the bricks together and actually making it happen. I have the track plan laid out. It's just the scenery around it which I need to make, which is probably why I've taken so long to build it, because it's not the actual train side of things. It's kind of a lower priority, shall we say.
That's definitely quite the plan, and I think I'm approaching a point where I'm more excited to see people's layouts than I am seeing people's models, because I'm at a stage personally where I don't really have any more models that I want to build. I just want to focus on developing my layouts. So when you were describing your layouts there, it's a U shape, it's a branch line that connects to a main line, and there's a junction. That sounds exciting. That sounds like something I really want to see.
I am excited to share it and to work out. I mean, it's heavily inspired by, funnily enough, the timetables and the operation of the Reverend Audrey's own model layout, which was obviously a Thomas themed one, his Farquhar layout. But a couple of years ago I first discovered that. I think when it was revealed. No, sorry, it wasn't revealed at the Audrey extravaganza a couple of years ago, but it was on display, and then shortly after that, they released a DVD, which I was lucky to get a copy of, which was like a full hour long narration by Audrey with brand new footage of the layout and operation. And he's just narrating his timetable for the day. It just really it really got under my skin. And I really thought that sounds really fun. I'd seen model railways in operation before that and various things, but it just that maybe because there was the Thomas connection, there's an added level of whimsy to it which you don't always get with model layouts. But yeah, I just thought that looks really charming, and I want that for myself in some form. But at the same time, I do want it to be. It's not a Thomas layout. My home layout is it's based around whatever my original Lego Railway will be. I don't really even have a name for it yet. I want it to be my own original thing. Obviously, I've got Thomas characters built, so they'll appear on it. But yeah, in my mind at the moment, it's a generic sort of branch line somewhere in the southwest, because obviously that's where I'm from. With the stock I've built for the layout, they're based around what stock I imagine the line would need. I thought roughly about what kind of operations would go on this branch, and then kind of work backwards and thinking, well, for this, they'll need this kind of wagon or they'll need this kind of wagon, and then built accordingly. And I think the pieces I have shared, I have mentioned my own sort of logic behind these things. And yeah, I think that's the main thing for me. Everything that's all of my Lego models that aren't Thomas characters, they are things that they're designed for my own little world, and they need to have a reason to be there. Even if I start off thinking, oh, I really like this loco, I want to build one, I then will want to work it within my own fictional world and have a logic as to why it's there, what it's doing as part of this line. So yeah, I'm glad to hear you're looking forward to hearing that. I hope other people find it interesting in some way as well, because I think a lot of it will, in the end, be very, because it's personal to me. I think I'll be a lot more enthusiastic about it than anyone else will be. So it may end up looking very, very boring, but I'm excited to share it. So that's the main thing.
And that is the end of the podcast. Kumata, thank you so much for coming on.
That's no problem. I mean, I hopefully next time I'm on, I won't be so ill. But otherwise, it's been very fun. Thank you for having me.
I didn't even notice that you were ill. I know you said so before we started recording, but after the first question or so, that completely slipped my mind because you were talking so calmly, you were talking really smoothly, and it was an excellent podcast. It was so good to have you on. Do you want to advertise any social medias that you have?
Well, my main social that I use is Twitter. Username is at KumataJDG. As I mentioned at the start, I do work as a digital artist, so the bulk of the stuff you'll see there will be digital art. However, if you do like Thomas Tank Engine or similar, then I do a lot of Thomas commissions, so definitely check that out, please. If I could be so shameless as to shield myself on your podcast. But otherwise, if you are only interested in the Lego side of things, I do have an alt account. My alt account is Brickstall Builds, and that exists solely to retweet all of the Lego posts from my main account. So if that's all you care about from me, the Lego, then follow that one. Otherwise, I am on most other socials. I use the username Kumata or Kumata JDG pretty much everywhere I go. So if you want to look for me under that name under any site you go on, and if you find me, then feel free to give me a follow.
Of course, all of the links will be in the description, and if you want to see some of that amazing Lego train and digital art action, give him a follow. So that is the end of the episode, and time for the tagline, which I haven't said in a few months. We will BRB with more BRBs. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.